Good morning. You can go ahead, you can open to 1 Samuel 25. That'll be where we'll be this morning. This quarter we've been studying women of the Bible, learning from them and their characters. Looked at a lot of different things. Today we are going to be talking about Abigail. And no, I do not mean my daughter. We will be talking about the biblical character Abigail in 1 Samuel 25. Other than she is in 1 Samuel 25, what do we know about the biblical character of Abigail? She was brave. Should I cue Jeopardy music? Okay. She ended up being David's wife. Spoiler if you have not read 1 Samuel 25. So the setting here is that Saul is king and he has turned his anger on David. He does not like that David is getting more attention and more praise than he is. And so he is turned to trying to hunt down David and kill him. David, in the previous chapter, before this, had Saul in a cave at his mercy, could have killed him, even though Saul has tried to kill David multiple times at this point, but didn't. And reasoned with him and said, look, I had your life in my hand. You've been coming after me. There's no reason. I'm loyal to you. That leads us up to 1 Samuel 25. Now, in this setting, David and his men have been hiding out in this area. And in the area they are in, they have been being good neighbors to all those around them. There is a wealthy man by the name of Nabal, however you want to pronounce it. Either way will be fine with me. Who has a lot of flocks and many other forms of wealth. His men have actually been guarding Nabal's flocks. But it is time for shearing. It's a season of shearing, which if you have sheep means, guess what? Money. Lots of money coming in. There's usually a big party, a big feast that they throw around this time period to celebrate the shearing of the sheep. David knows this, and so he is going to send some men to Nabal to ask for some rations for him and his men, reminding them, of course, of what has happened so far. So, let's read in 1 Samuel chapter 25. I haven't had a chance to do this in over a year. I'm going to call on Hayden to read. Hayden, if you can read 1 Samuel 25, verses 2 through 11.
And there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel. The man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep and 3,000 goats. He was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail. The woman was discerning and beautiful, but the man was harsh and badly behaved. He was a Calebite. David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men. David said to the young men, go up to Carmel and go to Nabal and greet him in my name. And thus you shall greet him. Peace be to you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have. I hear that you have shearers. Now your shepherds have been with us, and we did them no harm, and they missed nothing all the time they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore let my young men find favor in your eye, for you will come on my feast day. Please give whatever you have at hand to your servants and to your son David. Said to Nabal.
Yes, sir.
When David's young men came, they said all this to Nabal in the name of David. And then they waited. And Nabal answered David's servants, who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who are breaking away from their master. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed from my shearers and give it to the men who come, for I do not know from where?
All right, so David and his men have risked their life protecting the flocks and the sheep and the goats of Nabal. He asked for a ration to come to his men just as a thank you for what you have done. And what is Nabal's response? I don't know you. Who are you that you're going to come here and ask me this question? You know, there's a lot of stray people who are disobedient to their masters running around in this area, play on what's going on between David and Saul. And how do I know you're even who you say you are? And he's going to pretend to act really like he doesn't know him. Have y'all ever witnessed a situation like this? Not with the hostility, but where you encounter somebody or somebody's encountered you, or you've witnessed this, and somebody pretends not to know the person. What, one or two head nods? Yes, okay. How do you think David, who, by the way, by the biblical description, he's ruddy, which means what? He's a redhead. How do you think red-headed David is going to respond to this? Right? Not reasoned and well, like his interaction with Saul in the chapter before, right? Saul, you keep trying to kill me. I could have killed you multiple times in this cave just now. I didn't. Can you just let it go? You're the king. I've acknowledged you're king. I'm your servant. And, you know, what God has said will happen in due time, and God will do it, not me. That's not the response that he is going to have of this. And the people who witness this interaction are aware of it, right? Have any of you ever witnessed your boss say and do something really, really stupid? I'm in sales, and sometimes my managers come over to help. The help is not always help. The way they approach things sometimes, especially not having been involved in the situation from the get-go, is going to hurt more than it's going to help. The attitude they take, the tone they take, and it's not that they aren't better than us a lot of times at sales, it's that they don't know what's going on. And they're like, well, the reasoned approach didn't work, so here I come. Mario? And sometimes even if we have. It's easy to get caught up in the moment and get a little huffy, right? I point out that David being redhead is just a biblical description. I'm throwing it in there. I don't know if that really has anything to do with the situation. We just know the stereotype, right? By all accounts, if you read this, a trained eye might also think David is bipolar if you read through the Psalms, right? So you'll kind of see some of these things in his reactions and his responses. Nabal had this very strong reaction to David's request. Why should I just randomly give what I have worked hard and earned to anybody that comes through here and just throws a name my direction? We also know, by the way, that during this season, and as this goes on, because he really didn't seem to be aware of what had happened, you combine this with something we're going to read a little later, it appears he might already have been into his cups. because he's not going to be aware of it. When he's told what happens later on, well, you'll see the response. Any other observations, thoughts, comments here on these first 11 verses of 1 Samuel 25? We haven't even hit our main character yet. All right, Josh, do you mind reading verses 12 through 17 so we can see what happens next?
I have to give me just a minute, brother. I walked in and I got my Bible out yet.
Ah.
I got you there. Where are we?
1 Samuel 25.
1 Samuel 25.
And 12 through 17.
12 through 17. So David's young men turned on their heels and went back, and they came and told him all these words. And David said to his men, "Every man gird on his sword." So every man girded on his sword. So David was girded on his sword, and about 400 men went with David, and 200 stayed with supplies. Now one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, "Look, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, and he reviled them. The men were very good to us, and we were not hurt. Nor did we miss anything as long as we accompanied them when we were in the fields. They were a wall to us, both by night and day, all the time we were with them, keeping the sheep. Now therefore, know and consider that you will do, for harm is determined against our master and against all our household, for he is such a scoundrel that one cannot speak to him."
Okay, so one of the servants observing this has a little bit of wit about him, right? He knows how David and his men are going to respond. Now, when we talk about David's men, what kind of men flocked to David during this time when he was hiding from King Saul? I heard something. Mighty men? Fighting men. Would the word outlaw be appropriate for a fair amount of them, based on the biblical description of who was coming? There were some scoundrels in there too, but they respected David and did what he said. So when David says, "Grab your sword, we're going to go kill them all," they don't really seem to have any problem with this, right? We'll kill them, we'll take the wealth, it'll be ours, and, everybody will learn. Somebody helps you, you be courteous to them. You could see the reasoning rationale in these guys' head. One of the men who witnessed this took it to Abigail, Nabal's wife. Why would he go to Abigail? She went over Nabal's head. I heard something over here. She was discerning. Obviously, there's no point talking to Nabal. Most likely well into his cups when he makes this response. If you have ever been around someone when they were inebriated, you probably are familiar with that response and know not to bother. What does this say about the character of Abigail, that he wouldn't go to Nabal's head servant, he wouldn't go to anybody else, he goes straight to the master's wife in this situation? She clearly has a good reputation among the servants, right? She's level-headed, well-reasoned. What was the description we read a minute ago, Hayden? Of good understanding and beautiful appearance. He knows something has to happen. He knows they are all about to die. And he's going to the one person that he thinks can help him, and that is Abigail. Any thoughts, comments, observations? All right. Mario, if you will read verses 18 through 22 so we can see Abigail's initial response.
Abigail lost no time. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5, now that one I'm not sure of, seiz,
Yeah.
5 seiz of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisin, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys. Then she told her servants, "Go on ahead, I'll follow you." But she did not tell her husband, Nabal. As she came riding down the donkey into the mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending toward her, and she met them. David had just said, "It's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the desert so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him."
All right. David has made his intentions clear. He's not only told his men to gird your swords, he's pretty much getting ready. He's making an oath, right? God, do so to me and worse if I leave one of these joker's men behind by daylight. He is coming to kill everyone. Abigail's reasoned response is immediately. Here's stuff that's ready. Take it now and head out to David and try to cut him off at the pass. Give me a few minutes to prepare myself, and then I'm going to come along behind you and talk to David. You have as a person of understanding, I like that statement about her, that she's a person of understanding. She sees what's going on. She comprehends immediate action is necessary. I cannot let this stew. I cannot let it fester. She may not realize that David's already left with his men, but he has. So she immediately takes action, and she prepares to present herself to David. Thoughts, observations? All right. Leanne, I love that look. Do you mind reading verses 22 through 31 as we're going to see her plea and response?
And God then said, "And go also to the enemies of David, because we will know that all who belong to him are near the light." Now when Abigail saw David, she dismounted quickly from her donkey, fell on her face before David, and bowed down to him. She fell at his feet and said, "O me, my lord, only let this man live be. Please let your maidservant speak in your ears, and hear the words of your maidservant. Please not, my lord, regard this man from Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is wisdom. And I, your maidservant, did not see him yet, because my lord knew this man. Now therefore, my lord, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, since the Lord has held you back from coming to bloodshed, and from avenging yourself with your own hand, now then let your enemies and those who seek harm from my lord be as Nabal. And now this present which your maidservant has brought to my lord, let it be given to the young men who follow him. Please forgive the trespass of your maidservant. For the Lord will certainly make for my lord an enduring house, because my lord fights the battles of the Lord, and evil is not found in you throughout your days. Yet a man has risen to pursue you and seek your life, but the life of my lord shall be found in the battle of the living of my lord your God, and the lives of your enemies he shall slay now, as Renabal never slain. And it shall come to pass when the Lord has done for my lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and has appointed your king over Israel, that this will be no grief to you, nor offense of heart to my lord, either that you have shed blood without cause, or that my lord has avenged himself. But when the Lord has dealt well with the Lord, remember your maidservant.
All right. Let this iniquity be on me. How is this iniquity, this sin, this reproach upon David in any way, form, or fashion Abigail's responsibility? It's not, right? We can all agree. First response, she comes before him. Well, before I start that, let's do this. First response, she comes up to him. She immediately bows down to him. She is showing him respect, right? And then she begins her plea. What are signs of wisdom you see here in Abigail's response to David, who has his men gathered in anger to come to war to wipe out everyone in her household?
This is just fantastic. Her response, in plain English, her response is courage, it is humility, and boldness. And I'm thinking about, we just studied not long ago, Esther, and her courage, and her humility, and her boldness. And these are attributes that are so great. Anybody who's been in the military, or who knows about the wars, we know that there's a lot of women that fought boldly, and they were courageous and gave their lives up. And there's a certain amount of love that compels people to do that. And so I'm thinking that Abigail's characteristic traits are just something to behold, because we men can learn from that too. Boldness, courageous, and humility. All those three things are traits that really good to hunger.
The boldness, courage, and humility all rolled into one. When you are angry with somebody and they come to you with hands up, right? That they're giving you the sign, let's slow down, let's take a breath. Does that bring you down a level in any way when you encounter this situation? Yes? Instead of saying, let's just go head to head, we're going to knock each other out, it's, hold on before I act and do something stupid, right? We've all acted and done the stupid things before. We know that. If we say we don't, we're lying to ourselves. But here, she comes, she shows humility by falling on her face. She begins with a respectful greeting. I get this at work. I've been used this way before. I've just got one of those personalities that kind of puts people at ease, typically. So when somebody has made someone angry and messed up, they take the customer away from that person and they bring them to me. And I'm like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. We start off that way. I listen to what has happened, what is going on. I gather the needs. We go sit together and we find a way to resolve the situation. They called me in not long ago because somebody that was friends with one of the owners came in. They wound up one of the newer people, and in not as nice a words as this, they said that this person botched everything from beginning to end, and we need to save the situation. I didn't have an issue from beginning to end. As soon as I introduced myself, it's just because you're polite. It's the way you're carrying yourself in this setting. People can perceive that. They can see when you're trying to come to resolve a situation instead of egging it on or making it worse. Abigail comes with humility, with a respectful greeting, and the first thing she says is, Nabal is a fool. Don't worry about what this idiot husband of mine has said and done. Let this iniquity be on me. Yes, buddy.
Yeah, she understood the character of both Nabal and David.
Okay.
She knew what they were going to do. And she said, I've got to do something to stop this.
Absolutely. She understood, that's going back to that statement earlier. She was a woman of good understanding. She understood the character of her husband. She understood the character of David and his men. And then she says, quote, and I find this interesting, I did not see you coming. In other words, if she had known, she would have just came out and greeted David's men, and this whole offense thing never would have happened, right? The iniquity be on me, it's my fault, I didn't see you coming. I could have avoided all of this for us. So she takes responsibility for Nabal's actions. I want to go back to another statement in the introduction of this when they tell us about Abigail. It was in what Hayden read. She was, let me see what my Bible says, of beautiful appearance. I know it's not a popular thing I'm about to say, but it's kind of hard to be mad at a pretty face, isn't it? I got girls, and they come up to me, and then they put their smile on, and it's hard sometimes to stay mad when they come up with that sweet smile. She took time to prepare herself, by the way, before she went to greet David. So this seems to be something that she understands. And as she's going through all these things, yes, she says, Nabal's a fool, don't worry about him. If I'd have seen this, we could have avoided this whole thing. I'm sorry you had to interact with them. But she also does something different, because if you remember, Nabal's accusation is, you're a runaway servant from your master, right? You got all these worthless men hanging out with you. Why should I give you my stuff? She does the opposite. She says, I know that you are the Lord's anointed, and in good time you will be king. That's in essence what she's saying to David, who has been hiding with his men from Saul the king. She's acknowledging David is God's anointed. How do you think that resonated in David's ears after everything he's been through? Y'all can't see it, but everybody's got a good response of, okay? So David is being reinforced. His position, I hate to phrase it this way, but she's also catering to his ego a little bit, right? You are the Lord's anointed. God is going to put you on the throne, and in due time, when the Lord has blessed you, remember your maidservant. Remember me. Remember my wisdom in coming here and heading off this entire situation before it happened. Don't let this be a dark spot on your history, David. You could have killed Saul in the cave just now, and you didn't do it. You restrained yourself. You proved why you are God's anointed. You respect God's will in making Saul king and letting you come in your own time. Don't let this interaction with one idiot be a dark spot on your ledger.
Can we focus on this a little bit more? Because I think we hit on something that is pretty crucial in our relationship with one another. I think it's so neat that she's reminding him of what he already knows, but he's been keeping it inside of him because he's not going to, overstep the Lord. He's going to wait for God to hand him the kingship. And I think basically if we were talking to one another, he was telling them, remember you're a Christian. Not in those words, but for us, sometimes we need to remind each other of who we are to help us calm down with our anger or with our temptation to be dragged away and enticed. And that's the importance that God puts people in our lives to help us with that. Does that make sense?
A graceful response. Without talking about the incident, have any of you ever been in a situation where you will admit you were hot about something and you were seriously about to go about it the wrong way? Okay. That's as close as I've come to 100% of people shaking their head to a question I've ever asked. I've even asked, nod your head if you've sinned, and then you'll still see some people sitting there going, She says, Nabal's not worth it. Don't stoop to his level. How would you respond? Because I've seen this before. I've been a part of this before. How would you respond if you were hurt and offended by somebody and somebody else came to you and took responsibility for that hurt and offense? Don't hold it against this person. I'm here, just let me bear the responsibility for what they did. We all know people say and do stupid things sometimes, Have you ever been in a situation where somebody came to you and took responsibility for what somebody else did to you or to somebody you know? That's a lot of heads bobbing yes as well. So what was your response in this situation? Did it bring you down any? In my experience, yes and no. One, because the person was such an idiot that the thing happened and should never have happened. And it's even worse because this person is taking the blame on themselves for it, right? But in the other, it takes you out of that moment because you're looking on this person with compassion. Somebody did no wrong. They're coming to you on behalf of somebody else, willing to take the blame. Does that remind you of another biblical character? I heard somebody say it, yes. Jesus. She, in essence, is doing for Nabal's household what Jesus did for us. She didn't do anything wrong, but she's willing to take the blame, the responsibility. David, in his anger, could have lashed out at her and killed her, right? Instead, he has a more measured response. Let's look at David's response here. Julie, do you mind reading verses 32 through 35, please, ma'am?
Then David said to Abigail, Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. And blessed is your advice, and blessed are you, because you have kept me this day from coming to bloodshed, and from avenging myself with my own hand. For indeed, as the Lord God of Israel lives, who has kept me back from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to meet me, surely by morning light no males would have been left in Nabal. So David received from her hand what she had brought him, and said to her, Go up in peace to your house. See, I have heeded your voice and respected your person. Now Abigail went to Nabal, and there he was, holding a feast in his house, like the feast of a king.
That's good, thank you. Blessed is the Lord who sent you to me. Blessed are you in your advice, who have kept me from bloodshed and avenging myself. Go in peace, I have received your offer. And I love this statement, I have heeded your voice and respected your person. How often have we seen people get really, really angry about something?
Chad, she took the wind right out of his sail. He came in anger and departed in peace.
It did. It completely halted everything that was about to happen here. And a lot of times, isn't this, when somebody's angry about something, isn't this really all they're looking for? Just oh, okay, you're right. This shouldn't have happened. You've acknowledged that it shouldn't have happened, and everything is going to be good now. being able to accept and acknowledge somebody. And I know I hate this expression that you validate somebody's feelings. I really do. It's, but the more I think about it, it's not that it's got the very negative connotation of politics, if I can just put it that way. But as someone who interacts with people, as someone who's typically pretty good with folks, when you sit and listen to someone and you acknowledge, okay, you have feelings, I understand your feelings about this. And then you get into whatever it is, yes or no, whether you're getting what you want or not, which is really irrelevant. It's just, yes, you have a right to feel this way. One of my kids is autistic, and I am working and talking with the counselor nowhere near as heavily as my wife, who's doing like 99.87% of the work. But for my 0.13 that I do, I am trying to learn more and understand and interact. The way I want to respond to things is not going to be effective, and I'm learning why, and I see that now. It takes a little bit different hands sometimes when you're dealing with certain situations. So she acknowledged David's anger. David tells her, I have heeded your voice. In other words, I've listened to what you say, and I've respected your person. I actually probably need to look through this more. Can anybody think of this statement being made to any other woman in the Bible? I have respected your person. I don't know. It just kind of stands out at me. You've got David, the head of the army, and then you got, little old Abigail over here standing in the way between them. I'm just trying to think of times that expression's been used. All right, next we get into verses 36 and 37. Abigail went to Nabal, and there he was holding a feast in his house like the feast of a king, and Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunk. Therefore she told him nothing, little or much, until morning. So it was in the morning, when the wine had gone from Nabal, that his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him, and he became like a stone. So clearly Nabal was also probably early into his cups earlier in the day, because he doesn't seem to remember anything that has happened based on this, right? He hears what he did. He hears how close he came to death, and his heart came like a stone. Those of you who do biology and medical things can probably tell me more of what that was, but ultimately, he's going to go into a coma for 10 days and die of shock of finding out what he did. Finally, we have this, verses 38 to 42. Then it happened after about 10 days, the Lord struck Nabal and he died. So David heard that Nabal was dead and said, Blessed be the Lord who has pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and has kept his servant from evil. For the Lord has returned the wickedness of Nabal on his own head. And David sent and proposed to Abigail to take her as his wife. When the servants of David had come to Abigail at Carmel, they spoke to her, saying, David sent us to ask you to become his wife. Then she arose, bowed her face to the earth, and said, Here is your maidservant, a servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord. So Abigail rose in haste, rode on a donkey, attended by 5 of her maidens, and she followed the messengers of David and became his wife. All of her requests of David were fulfilled. He did not bring the army down and kill all of Nabal's men. He pardoned the reproach, and she also said, Remember your maidservant. David remembered her, and he saw, man, God is good. I know a good thing when I see it. You got a wise, beautiful woman here. Go ask her if she'll become my wife. He sees this as a blessing from God, and Abigail, of course, winds up with a much wiser husband. All right, life lessons from Abigail. What lessons can we learn from her? I heard something.
Cool heads prevail.
Cool heads prevail. I got that here on my thoughts as one of my observations. I phrase it slightly differently. Grace, not blame, can save the day. Have any of you ever been in a situation, and it's usually at work where these situations occur, where somebody did something and they blamed you? Our first response is to get uppity and defensive, right? Yes? If you say no, I'm going to question your integrity. But what happens when we take that pause, we take a breath, and instead of saying, I'm going to point the finger and assign blame, we use logic and reason through the situation. For me, that has worked very well throughout most situations in my life. Grace, not blame, can save the day. Cool heads prevail. Another thought is, when harm is done, it is best to act quickly to remediate the situation, to mitigate the damage. What happens when you're angry about something and then you just sit and stew on it and nobody does nothing? Does your anger continue to build? What happens if you immediately say, wait a minute, that's not how I meant that. Look, I'm just going to throw this out. Probably been 10 years ago. Had to been because I was in Texas. Sarah and I were talking, and then I noticed an immediate change in her facial expressions and her posture and tension toward me. And I stopped and thought, what did I say that was misunderstood, or wasn't misunderstood, but just wasn't well thought out? And I sat and followed my thoughts back. What did I said? What had I done? And then I don't even remember what it was, but I said, oh, when I said this, I was trying to say this. And it was almost instantly was like, oh, okay. And then the tension was gone. The sooner you act when harm has been done, the less damage. But when you hold on to that anger and bitterness for an extended period of time, it is much harder for it to go away. We're out of time. I was going to say read Isaiah 53 and compare Abigail's actions to Jesus's. She took the blame for what somebody else did, just as Jesus did for us. Abigail was a mediator on behalf of Nabal. Christ is our mediator. And the final life lesson I had for this, choose your husband wisely. Might have been better for a younger group on that one. I appreciate everybody's attention and comments.